We're going to officially call this meeting to order at 1:06. We're going to start with Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Waller.
I pledge, right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, it's very odd to do it remotely. I get it.
Not seeing a thing.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Closed session report. Met with staff and gave direction. I need an approval of the minutes for the June 9th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Raymer,
Raymer.
I need you to vote.
Oh, aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad Waller.
Aye.
David. And I, so that's 5-0. The approval of today's agenda was motioned by Raymer and seconded by Mike. We will start with reports to the board. First up, budget update, Dr. Alpern.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Happy to be here to talk about a budget. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new in the last 24 hours. The first thing is that yesterday, the governor and leaders of the state legislature announced that they had reached an agreement on the budget for the coming year, which is fantastic. You will not see that budget here today in terms of what we're asking you for approval on. Couldn't turn that around that quickly. But just in terms of just some of the pieces that we're hearing, it looks very promising, especially relative to the governor's May revision for K-12 schools. We expect to see many of the proposed cuts that the governor had rescinded. And originally, the governor's proposal had a lot of the federal monies targeted only for unduplicated students that attended schools in concentration districts. That will no longer be the case. The federal monies will actually follow the unduplicated students to their districts of residence. So that's going to be a big win for kids across the state. It's huge. However, there is a strong reliance on deferrals. We've talked about this before in my previous presentations, and so it's going to require us to do a lot of borrowing over the course of the next school year at least, and it will really be a very delicate balance of walking a tightrope to make sure that we have enough cash in hand to be able to pay our bills on a daily, monthly basis. They're included in the language is some job protection for various employees, categories of employees, and there are also assumptions in the proposal or in the approved plan that relies quite heavily on the federal government lending a helping hand to the states. So again, the details of that will be forthcoming in the days and weeks ahead, but primarily what I wanted to share with you are the details of the budget that we're asking you to approve today, as well as another option, scenario 2. So scenario 1 is the budget that we have prepared for you to approve and adopt today. We are only asking for you to do this as a perfunctory legal compliance issue because we have to submit an approved adopted budget to LA County Office of Education by June 30th. We recognize that we will be presenting you a different budget probably in the next 2 months that will look very different based on the new information that will be coming out in the next week or two. So the revision that the budget that you're being asked to adopt today includes the following assumptions. It would allow us to have a 3.24% reserve. for which meets the 3% minimum requirement. It does not include reductions, assumptions of reductions, and so that's why you see in the following two out years such significantly low reserves. Under any other circumstances, we would not ask you to approve a budget like this, nor would LACO accept a budget like this. However, we put together this proposal based on recommendations from LACO and what they will likely be allowing, knowing full well that a real, quote-unquote, more firmed-up budget would be coming later on. So this is the budget that we would be presenting and asking you to adopt today. Also on the docket today in the agenda is a request for the board to adopt a resolution that recognizes your fiduciary responsibilities to adopt a budget that has a minimum 3% reserve. Therefore, there is a resolution that that would involve a scenario that looks like this. That scenario and that resolution that we're asking you to approve today, we also would be submitting to LACO. That's why they would accept our budget, because we're also asking you to acknowledge your responsibilities by recognizing that should a budget, which it won't happen, come through that really actually look like the May revise, you would be required to reduce by $1.6 million in the 2021 school year and $6.4 million in the 21-22 year. So again, this is perfunctory, but that's the budget, and budget 1, budget 2 that we're going to be hearing about, discussing, and asking you to approve today. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, and it might be that this question should be answered later in the agenda, but you mentioned strong reliance on deferrals. The latest thing I read said a lot more will be deferred. Are the trends that are set up for us now large enough, or do we need a larger number to be sure?
I spoke with our fiscal services director this morning once we saw this, and we believe as of today, the trans and the other board items that we have on the agenda that we're asking you to approve will meet with what we anticipate to be our cash deferral needs. However, that's subject to change, and if we do have to change that, we would bring new revised language and requests for board action.
A couple of questions, Dr. Alpern. One, maybe more of a comment. Obviously, it's
You can take your mask off.
fortunate to. It's okay. It's unfortunate to see the reserve drop to the minimum. After all the effort we put to get it up where it needs to.
Right.
If you could maybe comment to the kind of things that the scenario 2 does to reduce our costs so that we can do our best to preserve what reserve we can. And then the second question or comment, I know we've been working hard to do a refunding of some of our bonded indebtedness. And I'm assuming that that's going to be held in abeyance, but if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, I will do my best here. The scenario 2 that is laid out for you here does not come with it a list of reductions. So the assumption is, from the fiscal side, is it's a bottom line number, and then that number, should it be necessary, it's not going to be necessary in this exact scenario, since we got different news yesterday, but to ensure that you maintain higher reserves is really a discussion among the board and then, staff and a budget process of recommendations for reductions. So I think that answers
Yeah,
that.
just two
question?
things, yeah, and obviously, as we move forward, for the last 4 months, we've been very prudent is probably a soft word in the way of any sort of hiring behind positions. We have, at least 15 positions we haven't hired behind in this process because we just don't know what tomorrow holds exactly. The essential positions, school psychologists, for example, for testing for IEPs, for special ed, is an exception. So we are going to look at everything and continue to look at everything as we move forward. And so being prudent is a good thing. To your second question, Mike, our financial advisor, John Isom, we've been in contact with him regarding the refunding or refinancing of some of those bond series. And we're in a holding pattern until we see a stronger savings for our taxpayers. And so we should know more in the next few weeks, but that is on hold for right now based on the market and where it's at.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, but I'd say the only comment I have is, this budget obviously is changing rapidly. So what we're approving today doesn't preclude us from making changes in July and August. It's just ultimately setting the May revise that we're kind of stuck with right now, and then, making change. So, to Mike's point, I'm grateful and thankful that we have the reserve that we have now, because the cuts and the changes and things we'd be doing would be drastically more painful. But likewise, it is my hope that my legacy and by extension, Mike and Brad Waller's legacy is we don't leave the district with the reserve we came in with. But
Me with that.
yeah.
And David with
yeah,
that.
that's our present to you
Send
too.
it out the door.
But recognizing ultimately this is times no one anticipated. So
Thank you.
thanks. All right, we're going to take a quick cleaning break before Dr. Wesley joins us. We should have some interlude music going.
While they're setting up, I do want to share with you, we have our survey expert. Susan really has taken the lead on this. Susan Wiles here, our Executive Director of Ed Services. And then Dr. Wesley will obviously share from the staff side, but Susan's kind of taken the family parent survey portion. And she'll be sharing. And also just wanted to let you know our reopening think tank today talked about the potential for our next edition of our survey, which will ideally go to parents and staff next week. But we'll have Susan and Nikki take it from here.
So without further ado, Ms. Wiles.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board President Cirkin, members of the board and cabinet. My name is Susan Wilds. I'm the Executive Director of Educational Services, and I'm here to talk to you today about the results of our first Pulse, our first family and staff readiness surveys that went out to families just last week. So just to give you a general overview, the purpose of our surveys was really to get the first, and I like to use the term pulse of our community. As we know, information is changing very rapidly and evolving minute by minute. And so it's important throughout the summer as we gear towards reopening, as we're taking a consistent pulse. As soon as we know more information, to get that out to our families and get their feedback and their readiness. So we were really looking for everyone's readiness and comfort level with this, just with the general idea of returning to school. We were looking to gauge their feelings around school safety, the health procedures, what was important to them, what their concerns were. So we had a really good response rate. We had 4,636 responses on the family survey, which represented approximately almost 46% of our student population. We had about 25% came from the high school, another 21% came from the middle school, and we had just over 50% at the elementary schools. So one of the first questions we asked is, knowing what you know, or the guidance that we have to date, what is your comfort and readiness level with your student returning to school campus? Which plan best meets their needs? At the time we presented this survey on the 15th, we had 3 options. Going forward, those options are going to be reduced. But what was interesting is that almost 82% of our families said that in some way, shape, or form, they were comfortable and ready for their children to get back on school campus, whether that was in face-to-face or it was some sort of hybrid. They felt very strongly that their students needed to have face contact with their teachers. Another 11% of our families expressed that for their needs, particularly as related to their health concerns, they felt that distance learning 100% of the time was going to best fit the needs of their family. And then we had approximately another 8 to 9% who were undecided at this point. When we delved down into what their concerns were, overwhelmingly, the concerns are similar, you'll see, to the staff survey in just a minute. Spreading the virus. Catching the virus, being responsible for spreading the virus was a big concern. Families were concerned, not necessarily around the challenges of social distancing, but would their children be able to meet the challenges of physically distancing on the school campus? There were a lot of qualitative answers that were provided as well, and families felt they expressed confidence in the districts and schools' ability to maintain protocols and procedures. They were more concerned with their children being able to follow those protocols and procedures. And so that was an interesting kind of piece of data that came through. A lot of parents expressed that they're ready for their children to come back because they're being physically and socially distanced from their friends and their teachers and their peers is not optimal. And they felt strongly that this was something their students would benefit from. Surprisingly, I expected a much higher number. Surprisingly, only 8% of our families expressed concerns about their children having to wear masks all day long, which is interesting to me. I expected a much higher number. We had another area where we allowed parents to give us open feedback in the form of other, and we had quite a few parents indicate that based on their family needs, full-time working parents, whether those full-time working parents were in the home or whether they were outside of the home, was one reason they needed their students to be able to access school again. The age of the students, the primary students, had really had challenges with distance learning, as well as, again, overwhelming lack of social interaction was a key indicator. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Wesley to share with the staff survey.
So for the staff readiness survey, we also had a pretty high return rate. As you saw earlier, it equated to about 52% of our staff responding. And of the 52%, 91% stated that they would return to work or school if we opened with cautionary measures. And interestingly, 44% of the 91% said that they would return confidently. The other 47% said they would return with some concerns. Very much like the family survey, this mirrors it. Actually, the top 3 concerns, just like the family survey, is catching or spreading COVID was number 1. The second highest was health concerns for myself or family, and the third, just like the family surveys, was issues with social distancing, not being able to do that. The fourth actually was class sizes, so that was another one of the concerns. I'm not sure what's going on here. Okay. Shift F, sorry. Then going to the third bullet, we asked about the models at the time. As you're aware, we thought face-to-face 5 days a week would possibly be one of the options, a hybrid model, and we also asked about distance learning. So there was a near split between the face-to-face and hybrid, like a 40%, almost that much split between those two models. And then about 15% stated that they preferred to have a full distance learning model. And again, we're talking about our staff. 15, yes. So about 15% said that they would fully prefer distance learning model, and then the rest were about split between the two, face-to-face and hybrids, which again is aligned to the first bullet, which is most staff would prefer to come back to some extent. We asked about daily symptom checks, and we asked about an app. Would you be comfortable using an app to indicate your ability to return based on these various symptoms? And only your site administrator and HR would see the results. And 72% said they'd be comfortable using the app. So that's a good indicator as well. So I think between the two surveys, you can see there's some alignment there, and it's given us some good indication that both our staff and our families are eager to come back to some extent, if not, more than we're able to provide. And we we look forward to following up with another pulse survey. Do you have any questions for either one of us?
No.
I guess I'll ask.
Wrong.
It's hard to tell who else is asking, if anyone is.
Go ahead.
The app for symptom checking, is it just a concept at this point, or there are candidates out there, privacy issues, things like that?
No, that's a good question. So Qualtrics, the one that I've been investigating, was developed by Qualtrics, and I think Mr. Christensen has been using one as well. He mentioned that today, and probably can speak to it even further. They've actually got it in action. We've looked at it. Basically, it's already been developed. Staff, it pushes out to staff. They indicate going through the list of the questions, and then it gets submitted.
And I guess, does the app get submitted to somebody, or is it just like a red-green, like you're good to go in or you're not good to go in?
It's just an answering of a questions, yes or no.
But I mean,
Yes, and then the admin would have access to the information to determine if somebody has been, if they indicate yes in any of the indicators, then that would be communicated to the administrator on site.
as well as the person giving it, like saying,
Yes,
flash, don't go inside? kind of
yes,
thing?
yeah.
Okay.
Any other
Yeah, I have one question. How many families do we have at Redondo? You did the number next to our student population, but do we know how many families?
So families was harder to calculate. Power School has difficulty looking at households, so pulling that report. So we were going based just on students, mainly because we were asking parents to answer multiple times based on multiple students, because their readiness for like an 11th grader might look very different than readiness for a 6-year-old.
And
So we wanted,
we're
the
able to see all of that, like how the juniors versus
Yes.
second graders.
yeah, absolutely.
And the open-ended questions, there were some open answers.
Yes.
Where did those responses go?
So those went to myself. We had about 74 pages worth of open-ended responses. Yeah, they were meaty. And it was really interesting. A lot of the responses gave clarification around their concerns. A lot of respondents took the opportunity to kind of give us their perspective of what spring distance learning looked like, which was obviously not necessarily related to the survey, but that was really good information for us in Ed Services to have, to kind of understand what the needs of our families are. And I'm actually going to speak to that in a little bit when you talk about our TT group and how we've been able to kind of think about that. There were a lot of just kind of really open-ended. There were a lot of questions just letting us know how their children would feel having to wear masks, how their so just kind of really an open opportunity to just kind of tell us where they're struggling.
Okay. And obviously anyone that is directed in a certain area, those were passed along.
Yes,
So
yeah.
it's a great opportunity for our parents to give some.
They gave a lot of feedback. Yeah, a lot of feedback.
I just didn't want it to.
Yes, I read all 74 pages. Yeah. Any other questions?
I think we're good. Thank you both. Well, since you'll be sitting from your seat, we'll start with you, Dr. Keller.
Okay, I'm going to have some guests in a moment. Sharing, but obviously wanted to congratulate our seniors who graduated at RUHS, Dreisler and Independent Study. Ceremonies, the virtual ceremonies were very well received. I'm sure you all heard and received text, emails, periodically regarding each experience. And I also want to hand it to and thank our middle school folks who did their promotions and our 5th grade principals who worked with their PTA as well in providing a virtual experience. Just a lot of positive feedback under tough conditions. And then want to thank the board, obviously the high school for putting on the best vehicle parade you could possibly put on. I think some of us lost our voices just screaming and supporting our kids. And there seemed to be a lot of fun at the event. Not the just kind of a surreal event when you think about it, but I do think the value was there, and I think the kids and the families appreciated it, and of course the staff, because the staff haven't seen their kids in quite some time. Staff members have not. And then last Tuesday, I just want to share with you, last Tuesday there was a LA County Office of Education provided an in-person experience to come view for superintendents or district representatives on behalf of the superintendent to actually come into a very large room, probably the couple sizes of a RUHS gym. And, they did a health check, what have you. We all wore masks. We were probably 10 feet apart. But what they wanted us to do is see the first draft of the LA County Department of Health's protocols and guidelines for K-12 schools or TK, what have you, for public schools and private schools in LA County. The interesting thing is you say, well, why would they bring us all to the room? They didn't want to send out the document electronically. I give them credit because they knew that if they sent this out electronically, it would be pushed out to the press and others right away, and I respect that. That being said, it was a tighter understanding of some of the restrictions, at least at that meeting, than I'd argue many of the leaders in that room expected. We know LA County tends to be a little tighter with their restrictions as a county, but understandably based on the data and the science behind it and the explanations we've been given. But I think we were given enough information to realize that coming back to a 5-day model, at least in LA County for now, 5 days a week for a school site, highly unlikely, if not impossible at this time. And so it's the first time that we were able to kind of say to ourselves, and plenty of superintendents and leaders walked out of that meeting saying, I'm just going to do distance learning. I heard it. And you're talking all of LA County, 80 school districts approximately. But understandably, at least we got the information, as I've shared with people. I'm not a public health official or expert. Just give us the directions, give us the directives, give us the protocols, and we as school people, I have the best people around, or we have the best people around, and we can make it happen. So with that, we were lucky enough to have, and I'd like to think that some of us had something to do with this. The next day, we were able to actually have Dr. Barbara Ferrer on the phone, who's the director of the LA County Department of Public Health, with several questions that were asked directly to her that came out of the meeting the day before on that Tuesday. So we got to hear Dr. Ferrer and my cabinet here speak specifically about the questions being asked to her as it pertains to schools. And so what I wanted to do is just share a few notes, and I shared this with some of you, but just a few highlights from her conversation with us was just a reminder, LA County's population has about 10 million people. It's a huge county, very diverse, rural, urban, suburban, resort communities throughout the county. Obviously, our data is different than the other counties, and so each county measures their restrictions based on the context given to them by the data that they're provided. She did her best. I argue she continues to do her best, at least with schools, to be, empathize with our context, our reality, having been a former principal herself at one time. A couple lines I took from her was, one is the goal is to settle in a space with a set of directives, but with some flexibility. And I understand there is some flexibility in this, but I think some of the bigger ones, which I'll talk about, are pretty clear. One is very clear. Face coverings appear, at least in the draft, to be mandatory. That could change. It's not our decision, not the board's decision. We are directed by the LA County Department of Public Health on what those guidelines will be. We will be working closely with Jessica Silberling, who runs our executive director of special ed. There obviously will be exemptions to the face coverings. One line she shared, Dr. Ferrer shared, and it's an interesting line, and I wrote it down verbatim. She said, face masks protect others. Face shields protect the individual. Let me say that again. Face masks protect others, whereas face shields protect the individual. Because I've been asked a lot about face shields. And again, we'll follow what we're given, but I think that was pretty clear to us, and there will be exemptions for face masks. I have not seen the exemption language to be clear. But we will learn more when the plan is cleared. Is provided to us, excuse me. The question about health check screenings, That's still a moving piece. We will be prepared regardless of whether we need to do it or not. We will have some sort of system in place. We are looking at apps as a consideration. We're looking at a paper process if necessary. Whatever is the most efficient and foolproof way to ensure safety on our campus for staff and students and families, we want to embrace. This is a concern for every school district in California. I will tell you that, is how do we get folks on campus, adults, meaning staff, and kids safely, and ensuring that folks aren't getting in who should otherwise be staying home. And we want to encourage people, if you check yes to any of the symptoms or any of the issues or any of the questions addressed, stay home. We're good with it. It's the first time I've been encouraging people to stay home in my entire life for not feeling well. I've typically taken a stand of, if you can make it, make it. But in this case, we're absolutely pushing the when in doubt, stay home. The other thing is there's a high probability, when there are cases on campuses, that the closure number will be, in other words, when a school will close. Let's just get this out. We were told, I think all of us heard this clearly, when there are confirmed 3 positive cases of COVID-19 in a school site, during a 14-day window, the LA County Department of Public Health will shut us down. They make that call. Yeah, we'll shut the school site down, yes, make that clear. We'll shut the school site down. And so let me say that again. So when there are 3 confirmed COVID-19 cases at a school site during a 14-day window, that school site will be shut down by the LA County Department of Public Health. That's what we've been told. So that's one piece that will go on our FAQs. Dr. Toronto can put it on his. We'll confirm that when we see the guidelines and protocols. And it's interesting, not to get in the weeds, but you have a high school like RUHS, which is significantly sized high school, and then you have a smaller school of Bernie Burrell, Madison, what have you. But the same protocol continues for both size schools under our current understanding. The other piece is conflicting over the 2 days. When I was there as a superintendent in a big building listening to LA County Office of Ed, it was a little different than when Dr. Ferrer spoke. Dr. Ferrer made it very clear that LA County Department of Public Health will in cases of COVID-19 confirmation, positive yes, they will do the contact tracing and work with the contact list and follow a very strict protocol with us. So they will take the lead on those instances. That is the final word we heard from Dr. Ferrer on Wednesday. Probably the biggest piece I would share, which is really, I know masks are sensitive for people or face coverings, but the social distancing, the 6 feet piece is, as she called it, as Dr. Ferrer called it, the gold standard. The 6 feet is not, it's not 3 to 6 feet. She clearly made, LA County Office of Ed and so did Dr. Ferrer, made it clear that obviously there's going to be some situations where, she's not going to get into the 4 feet or 5 feet. It's not 6 feet. But if you're as a school district employing a 3 feet apart social distancing model, that's not going to cut it, and that doesn't meet the what we call the standard of care. And so very clearly, the 6 feet, social, physical distancing, however you want to word it, there are some, there's obviously to the best of your ability, but when you are doing that as a district-wide kind of a contradiction to the clear 6 feet guidelines, that would be a problem and not meet the standard of care. And the standard of care really is, that's the phrase that's used, are really the directives, that were given and will obviously keep us from potentially putting kids or staff members in harm's way. And really just, if we follow the protocol, we feel that that we minimize the potential for anybody becoming positive with COVID-19. I think that's our goal. And so if we can abide by the guidelines to the best of our ability, we really feel we're in a good place for safety, for health, and for potential concerns after that. And then the great line she had at the end, Dr. Ferrer said, when things change, we change. And her point is that when data changes, when science changes, when we get new information locally or internationally, ideally we'll change whether that's positive or negative. And then with that, I wanted to pivot. We've been working in the reopening think tank, 5 subcommittees: health and safety, social-emotional support systems, family and community engagement, operations, and instruction. And today, what we have here, is we're going to have each of the four. Instruction is off on its own. That's a whole big bucket. But we do believe health, safety, socio-emotional piece, the family and community, and the operations are pieces we can actually present to you what our LACO has provided us, LA County Office of Ed, through the support of LA County Department of Public Health. And our people, our think tank, has created a more concise, manageable way of implementing this in our schools, and a lot of which we're already implementing in our CDC Child Development Center program. So with that, I'd like to introduce, if the first slide is up, Health and Safety, and Jessica Sibberling's here.
Hello. Thank you for having me today. So as part of the health and safety, a lot of the stuff I know that Dr. Keller just covered and some of the things that were shared from the county, and it does overlap because this came from the county document. So there are sort of 5 areas when you look in the county document, including staff, student, visitor interactions, health offices, meal services, campus cleaning practices, and community-based partnerships. So under the staff, student, visitor interactions, sort of to keep it, brief, but to share, because it's a long document, is, screening upon entry is definitely something that is discussed in there and required, and it discusses both active and passive screening. So right now, as we get more guidelines, that's when we'll be able to tell where temperatures fall in that document. At this point in time, it is still written in there, but they do describe the more passive things that would allow us to get students onto campus more quickly and without creating bottlenecks and groups of physical distancing that we're trying to avoid. Ingress and egress are really important, staggering large crowds, creating different entry and exit points, hallway traffic, ensuring that not all classes are out at the same time, having schedules for when students are out of the classroom so that you don't create large groups in the campus at any time. Events, no school-wide events, town halls, assemblies, those kinds of things where you're creating spaces of large students. Lots of hand washing. It talks about hand washing, hand sanitizing, schedules, signage, those kinds of things that we've been preparing for. Bathroom schedules as a means for us to properly clean down the bathrooms, which the operations side of the house, which Annette is leading that group, goes into more of the details of those types of things, and the CDC is already implementing a lot of these procedures. Recess and play equipment, it talks about it needing to be wiped down after every use, and so at this point in time, play equipment is not under the umbrella because it's almost impossible to regulate that on a playground. That could change. I mean, you still see it in our community and parks and things like that, those are pieces that have not been reopened. And then PPE, for our instructional assistants that cannot keep 6 feet away from our students with significant behavioral disorders or other cognitive delays where they need that level of support. That was specifically mentioned in it, and that they may need full PPE, including gowns, gloves, shields, and masks. And as long as they're trained in CPI methods, that it would be allowable for them to interact with the students to keep them safe. And luckily, all of our instructional aides who have those are already trained in those methods and procedures. We were already using those practices prior to this, so that's good news for us. Health offices, the big thing you want to talk about is a sick space and a well space. And so in an effort to maximize the layout of our campuses, we're talking with the nurses about doing a flipped health office, in that our well students who need Band-Aids, have headaches, who take regular medication, the support would come to them rather than them coming up to the health office, and that can be used then for the sick spaces. We need to place students should something occur or they need to be picked up along those lines or be screened because they are showing symptoms that we are concerned about. Again, health clerks and nurses also fall under the category of employees that would require full PPE because they have the most likelihood to be exposed to students that may or may not have COVID-19. Yeah.
Do we have HIPAA issues related to medications and stuff as far as if they're bringing in classrooms?
Not if we keep it on a schedule and we work with the classroom teachers. There's ways that we can do that outside of the classroom. But most, right now, the largest group of students that comes up regular are students with diabetes that need insulin and those kinds of medications. So, yeah. The nurses and I have worked really hard to build a schedule that would work well for sites. I think the biggest key is that we keep a lot of the supplies available, like ice packs, Band-Aids in classrooms, so you don't have to constantly be sending kids out for those kinds of things. And then the medication monitoring, we have a pretty strict schedule per site based on our health conditions, which we've been monitoring and by site working with myself and the nurses on what each kid would need. But yeah. Meal service, again, operations has a huge chunk. Our, both Annette's group and my group overlapped quite a bit. Safety and health and operations overlapped quite a bit. So a lot of the discussion around meal distribution was that you can't have all the students descending on the cafeteria at one period in time or lunch tables. So it talked about students eating in rooms when applicable and either having a schedule to pick up meals so that you could manage large crowds, so you don't have 200 kids going to get lunch at the same time. Eating in rooms was one solution, or designating areas that could be cleaned in between uses. Campus cleaning practices, a lot of it was built on schedules, communal surfaces being the area that's cleaned more often than others. Remembering that if you're using desks before and after meals, that they're cleaned. Bathrooms and play equipment were the big areas under campus cleaning practices. And then community-based partnerships. Based on the group that I was working with, Beach Cities talked a lot about the lessons that they provide and doing those virtually so they don't have to bring people onto the campus. There's, with our ability to use WebEx and other things even within the classroom to project lessons so that those lessons don't get lost. And then our partnership with RBPD to keep our campus safe and clean when people are not there. So. Okay.
Thank you. Give me a second. Sorry. School nurses? No. Yep. Second.
There's some video hiccups, otherwise I'd be able to watch what's going on.
Yeah, they're working on it as some issue. Okay. Thank you, Ricardo. Good afternoon, Board President Sirkin, members of the board who are here in person and virtually, and to Superintendent Dr. Keller, members of Cabinet. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon to talk with you a little bit about the social emotional support systems that our subcommittee has been working on. And so give me a second here to scroll this up. So I want to thank Raymer Flynn, Allie Stewart, and Heather Cash for their input as we work to address the mental health and social emotional development of all students in the following areas that were set forth as part of the LACO recovery framework. So as you can see, there are 5 categories here. I'd like to think that there's some of these things in here that overlap, and there's a lot that we're already doing, and especially here in the first one, school-based mental health. So building upon the success of our counselors and our psychologists, I think we're well positioned to further our work in the areas of MTSS support. So working to very clearly identify and support students who are struggling, specifically our special ed students, our EL, our foster youth, our homeless, LGBTQ, and really work to identify and support our students who are disengaged or chronically absent. As you know, through distance learning, that's a big area of focus for us, and really trying to re-engage those students so they stay on track credit recovery-wise at the secondary level, and I think across the board, just staying connected with their classmates as well as their school as a whole. We want to also build upon and prepare a crisis response team and expand upon the work we've already been doing over the years and incorporate an SEL curriculum K-12. Currently at the elementary level, we use Mind Up, and in middle school we use Second Step, so now we need to look at expanding on to grades 9 through 12. In the area of behavioral support systems, this past year we worked on providing restorative practices or a juvenile diversion program as part of our partnership with Beach Cities. So rather than suspending students, we were looking at other ways through a restorative justice program that we could basically balance out that education and discipline of students, so that way we weren't having to report it as a suspension to the state. And further our work with PBIS. This year, RUHS, Adams Middle School,
and Paris Middle School all participated in PBIS training through LACO. So we will look to renew our contracts with all 3 schools so that way they can continue that work, whether it be on ground or virtually. And then we want to provide some sort of training to our teachers. There's one out there that we did offer to the basically all staff. It's a optional training that they can do over the summer. It's about 5 hours. It's a trauma-informed classroom. It's through Texas Christian University. Moving on to family engagement and support practices, I would like to think that based upon the communication that we already have that comes out, whether from the district, from the school sites through Parent Square, or from our websites, everything is up to date. We do a great job of communicating to our families. We now want to take the information we do get from families and work with our partners such as South Bay Families Connected and Beach Cities Health District to really identify the needs in the community and provide those parent engagement and learning opportunities that meet the needs of what's going on currently in our community. I also want to give a plug here to Care Solace. Care Solace has been I can't overemphasize how important they've been to us. They provide us a utilization report every month, and it clearly lets us see the mental health needs in our community. They are an online platform where parents can go on, they fill out some questionnaires online, and it guides them to the right mental health support that they need. And so there still is, even with COVID-19 and schools being closed, a great need to address the areas of anxiety and depression in our community. We have to support our staff when we transition back, so school sites working to create opportunities for adults that connect, heal, and cultivate their own SEL competencies, because just as hard as it's been on students and parents, I think the staff have also gone through this. And so we want to be there to meet their needs as well and provide social, emotional learning, and professional development for them. And then on the last column, maintaining student staff recognition awards and traditions. Just as quickly as schools closed, I think that schools also started looking at how can we keep kids engaged, and all of our schools had some sort of Spirit Week virtually. They had award assemblies, they had coffee with the principal virtually, and we even most recently had our promotion and graduation ceremonies virtually. So creating that sense of normalcy, whether it be on ground or virtually, we want to keep our communities, we want to keep those traditions connected. And another plug here to Beach Cities Health District, just reminding everybody to join the Summer Wellness Challenge and the Redondo Beach Public Library. They are a great resource and community partners for all of us, so our students can all have access to digital books over the summer. Any
questions? Thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Drama.
thank you.
Little cleaning interlude again? Yeah.
Good afternoon again. I want to, before I go into family and community engagement, I want to thank my 3 other partners, Han Archer, Shannon Sneed, Kimberly Kiwis. They were 3 of the best partners to kind of think through this idea of how do we support families and communities during this time. So we wanted to present to you all today our prioritized list. This is what we want to go after first. We have a long list in every area, but we really wanted to focus down on what is the most important to meet the needs of our families first. So going into our work, we really thought about our job is how do we ensure that our students, our staff, and our families are involved and supported at the same time. We want everyone's feedback, we want everybody's involvement, but we understand that they require a large amount of our support during this time. So all of these 10 categories really fall into 4 areas. Really, these best practices are just around communication, making sure we've got stakeholders at the table, who are we partnering with, and then what supports do we need? Now in schools, historically, we've thought about teaching and learning as providing professional development to our teachers and to our staff and to our administrators. But during this time of distance learning, our kids are at home with their parents. And so one of the things that really has come out in this think tank as well as all of our surveys is that we have to think about how do we really frame the new roles for families and parents and families during this time. What are the roles and responsibilities that they're taking on? And then how do we support them in that? What kind of structures can we put in place to make that easier for them at home? So that's really our first area. This idea, we already have our feedback, we have our think tank, we're sending out surveys, but now we need to work collaboratively to kind of establish what are those roles and responsibilities going to be going forward. We've already started our needs assessment, and this is not just our overall needs assessment in terms of surveys, this is also the needs assessments of our vulnerable populations. How did distance learning look if mom and dad don't speak English? That was a whole subgroup we needed to go in, and we needed to dive in and see what was that experience like and what can we do better in supporting them for the fall. This idea of communication, so you're going to see it come up in several different areas. This multifaceted communication, we're very excited for the town hall with Dr. Keller, board members, experts in the area to really kind of communicate the entire plan. When we have, it's difficult to have the entire plan right now. We're trying to message out as much as we have, but what we heard from our families is that when we have it, they want to see everything. They want to know exactly what distance learning is going to look like. They want to know exactly what in-school is going to look like. That can also be in the form of the fifth one all the way across, even a video that they can start providing to their children ahead of time to show them what school is going to look like. This is the gate you're going to come into. This is what your teacher's going to look like in her mask. This is what your classroom may look like. And so that kids are just less frightened. There's less anxiety. At the bottom, maintaining a welcoming environment, this was really the essential question that drove the work of our subcommittee. How do we keep our parents and students connected to being Redondo during this time of disconnection? So every one of these areas, we kept falling back to how do we keep them connected to Redondo, no matter what school is going to look like. Flexibility is really, now that we're thinking, when we think about this idea of hybrid, flexibility and understanding that our parents have kids across schools, across classrooms, that we need to make sure that, that we are really mindful of the needs of families who have multiple students, blended families, twins, multi-age, really thinking about how do we logistically organize that so it works for families. We can't have parents running across different schools, different days of the week. Budget implications, everything here overlapped with what Dr. Alpern is going to speak of, but I do want to kind of really brag on Han Archer and Kim Kiwis and really the work they're already doing to kind of bring RBEF and RBPTA together, thinking about how fundraising will be different in the fall and how they can work together to kind of strengthen each other. And now really thinking about going forward, what kind of parent education do we need to put into place for our families so that they can best support our students? I want to turn it over to Dr. Alpern.
Thank you. Well, as Susan shared, I also think that I had a great team in my operations subcommittee, one of those being in the room with me, Mike Christensen, but also Laura Franco-Gallardo, who was our Administrator of the Year this year, and for good reason, and then also Derek Kinsey. So as a subcommittee, we had a number of areas of operations to consider, and as you've heard from Dr. Keller, the subcommittees were formed using the same categories that the LA County Office of Education used. So the operations subcommittee really covered a fairly large gamut of the operations of the school district. So for instance, human resources. So the recommendations that came out of our group really defers to a lot of area that Dr. Wesley oversees, or Derek Kinsey, et cetera. And so these are the large buckets for our operations group: facilities, child nutrition, budgeting and financial, technology, and human resources. So I think oftentimes when you hear about operations, you think about facilities alone, and there's a lot more to the operations of a school district than facilities, as important as it is. So facilities is actually our largest category, so much of which you've heard already. I won't get into all of the details around facilities because it really does overlap quite a bit with the safety and the health subcommittee. So all of the things around sanitizing, common areas, high-touch surfaces, having signage on campuses, and so just kind of thinking logistics. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, actually, we're going to be working at school sites and working with site administrators to specifically identify where on the campus we will have our one-way hallways, where we'll need to put directional signage, where we'll need to place additional hand sanitizing stations, et cetera, et cetera. So really where the rubber meets the road. So on the facility side, that's really it, right? It's just category, category, category. Sort of never ending, but really it's being flexible, planning for everything, and then adjusting as conditions change, as Dr. Keller and Dr. Ferrer refer. Child nutrition, much about the scheduling of the meal services is dependent on the model, the schedule, and the numbers of students that we're dealing with. So our child nutrition department is really, led by great individuals, and they're very attuned to what the requirements are, both for the state and the federal government, for both regulations, but also flexibilities that have come out since COVID-19. And so as soon as we're in a position to identify our schedule and our plan, then we'll be able to better roll out how meals will be distributed, served, et cetera. But you can be certain that we will be serving meals to students 5 days a week. On the budgeting and financial side, we did a lot in the spring to plan accordingly for the effective use of state monies as well as federal monies that either came our way or will be coming our way. We'll continue to do that. We've developed a system to track all of our COVID-related expenditures, because anything that we might be able to recoup through FEMA, we will definitely be putting on our list. On the technology side, we are always grateful and appreciative of the fact that we do have a one-to-one program in our district. And so the technology aspect of the subcommittee really wasn't dealing at the high level of how do we ensure students get a one-to-one device, but really about how to ensure that some of the classrooms at the secondary level that are dependent on labs, that we could transition that curriculum into a more virtual environment. So you see that here on the presentation. And then lastly, on the HR side, it really had to do with issues of changing working conditions and the degree to which various proposals in operations through COVID-19 are needing MOUs with our labor partners. And that's the main overview for my subcommittee.
Thank you, Dr. Alpert.
I do have one question. Did we find that there were any our students, just pick it up, that didn't have internet access? I know that was an issue in other districts.
There were a handful of students that did not have access, and the IT department worked with the principal and the families to get hotspots for them so that they were able to do that.
Yeah, Derek Kinsey, I believe, purchased 20 hotspots, and last I checked, it was something around 10 were utilized. And so we're aware of that. And we work with our principals in helping to make that happen. And so what you saw just now were the 4 buckets, the buckets that we feel comfortable moving forward. I want to thank all the people that everyone thanked here. The big one, obviously, next, and we're addressing it, not dealing with it, but we're addressing it head on, is the instructional piece, which is the teaching, the learning, the connection, all those important pieces, and of course, the schedule. And so it's arguably the most difficult part. A lot of these, as we shared, you've already seen them in place at the CDC. But I think, creating the schedule and what that looks like, and given the guidelines that ideally we're going to get from the LA County Department of Public Health, that will be guiding us in whatever plan as a district we pick, and potentially as a parent will choose. And so we want to be mindful of that. And the instructional group is, I hope I got everyone's name, is Dr. Wesley, obviously, Lily's involved, Jens, high school principal, Lisa, middle school principal, Dale, who's at Alta Vista, Teresa Van Duzen, our CDC person, and then our RBTA reps, Monica and Sarah. Did I forget anybody else? If I did, I apologize. Anyway, long and short of the story is we believe the COVID-19 guidance from LA County Department of Health that's coming, and LA County Office of Ed, their framework that they have provided us will likely change a bit. But we're continuing to address the things that we know we can do now so we can knock it off the list. I think that's the key. I mean, if you talk to Dr. Alpern, she's ordering everything we can now for the fall, so it's not something we're chasing, come August. We'd like to be, really the chase that is in front of us is the schedule, putting kids in potentially a schedule, deciding, what kind of learning environment it is or learning experience it's going to be, and putting our efforts just really towards the best experience possible given the context we're given and the guidelines and the protocols we're given. That's all I have.
Thank you. And thank you to all the staff and all the volunteers. It's, we all never realized how much free time we had till we got to assemble all these things. Saying that all in tongue in cheek, so, but no, I know it's a lot of work, so thank you guys.
Yeah, and thanks to the reopening think tank, the very dedicated group, and people show up every time, so I want to thank them.
Okay, moving on to hearing section. Having no advance written requests, we're going to move to the public hearing. So we're going to open the public hearing concerning the 2021 budget and reserve disclosure requirements. Do we have any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I need a motion and a second to close the public hearing considering the 2021 budget and reserve hearing.
Move.
Second.
Thank you. Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad Waller.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
And aye, so 5-0. Communications, I don't see any representatives for here. Is there any reports for RBF or
I
otherwise?
have one if you
Okay.
give me 1 second. I
Of
gotta get
course.
it on my computer. Okay. Tara Hitzig, the executive director, submitted this to me. It says, RBF summer sessions began yesterday, June 22nd. We're happy to report that all of the classes we're offering this year, we have surpassed the registration numbers from 2019 and had waiting lists for some classes. Christy Brown and Renee Regalato are doing an excellent job of taking care of all families and students along with our teachers. RBF is wrapping up the 2019-20 Investor Drive the end of June, and we have also surpassed last year's numbers and are very close to our projected funding despite implications from COVID. RBF has already begun planning and programming for Investor Drive 2021. Last week, Doris Donnelly Richmond filmed principals and key stakeholders for a powerful video to create excitement regarding the need to participate during the challenging year ahead of us. RBF will be announcing requirements and timeline for teacher grants to promote to our teachers in August. That's it. Thank you, RBF.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to consent calendar. Is there any items that anyone wishes to pull? Hearing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve 10.1 to 10.9?
So moved. Or second.
Okay. Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad.
Aye.
David. Did we lose you? Did we lose you, David? I think we may have lost him at the moment, so motion will carry 4-0 with 1 abstention. Moving on to 12.1, can I get a motion and a second to adopt the 2021 budget?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call vote again. Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad Waller.
Aye.
David. Okay.
Aye.
There we go. And he returns. And myself, so 5-0. Moving on to item 12.2, adopt resolution 1920:47, budget shortfall during COVID-19. Motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
And aye for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.3, approve for reading and for approval revision to board policy 31 or 3,100 budget. Motion and second, please.
Move.
Second?
Thank you. This item is for us to remove one line item related to what this board in the past has put in requesting to maintain a minimum 8% reserve, obviously in this current times, and begrudgingly, we would like to, we will be asking to remove it with the hope that.
Begrudgingly is a good.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the hope that a future board will restore it, but ultimately, I mean, the terms of which we did is there, but as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, the choice is there is no other alternative right now, so.
As I explained, as I explained to Brad, not having a line item that gives a number does not preclude any board from setting a goal or taking an action. It just gives the board more flexibility.
Of course, no, it's just, the removal of it, you know, it's.
symbolic.
Yes, correct. So, any other questions? Raymer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.4, approve issuance of 2021 tax and revenue anticipation notes, otherwise known as trans, and adopt resolution 1920:44 as attached. Motion and second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
A quick question to Dr. Alpern.
Yes.
So we're looking for, let's see, we had 11.45 million of transit approved for the current or the last,
1920.
I guess. Is the 20 gonna make it for us?
We do have a number of avenues by which we can borrow money. So you'll see a number of items. One of them is trans, but there are pooled dollars. And so we believe that the 20 million, it's a not to exceed number. So we may have to mid-year. We're just uncertain at this point when the deferrals are coming. So there's just some early indicators that deferrals are coming at different spots in the school year. And it's also dependent on federal relief, right? So I would imagine that for most of the 2021 school year, we're going to be monitoring and following the changing dynamics, and let's say federal monies don't come our way, we may have to come back to you and request additional
Well, just a
monies.
request, you know, as we go on through the year, if you could keep us apprised
Absolutely,
about how on a regular basis, whether that's in board meetings or in the fighting updates,
certainly.
where we stand against this mindset. Because I know just as a board member, seeing that I'm seeing it in my line of work, so really be a tough credit situation to develop.
Yes.
Yeah, that was gonna be what's gonna be the question was, you know, from a standpoint of things, I mean, borrowing is always tough regardless, but, I mean, are we more advantageous, authorizing more money now for the purposes of having available to borrow versus, you know, waiting hypothetically 6 months when we might need it and it costs more? And I don't know if, you know, I mean, that's just,
You know, we've been working to define timing as well as amounts. So we think that the 20, not to exceed 20 million is
I
appropriate.
get that, my question was.
It's kind of like it's that crystal ball, because like, there's a big emphasis right now where we're highlighting this notion of deferrals, but we've been operating with deferrals now.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's the size of the deferrals, and that is going to evolve over the course of the year. So we are really going to have to monitor that. The idea is if you give a number and then we work and we borrow that amount, we have to hit those markers. Otherwise, we have to pay back with interest. So we don't want to overstate our need.
No, of course, I mean, the idea would be is hypothetically, if the money was at 1% right now, I mean, just,
Yep.
it's being hypothetical, and maybe, we know interest rates aren't moving anywhere, but obviously this is an ongoing fluctuation. It just was a question of whether we felt that asking for it now, the short-term cost versus the extended out. But I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, I mean, our highest borrowing trans year was 2015, 16. And actually was the year actually we came in, it was by 500,000, but I mean, we had a very large borrow during that time, and again, a lot of it's just the deferrals,
So the amount here is not an amount that we secure right now.
Oh, no,
So
I
that
get that.
comes at different times, right? So
That's fine.
we
I
may
think-
get it at one rate
Yeah,
in the next month, which would look different in October.
yeah. The good news is, the good news is we can always authorize more if we need to. Hopefully, we won't need to.
Yeah, that was kind of the gist of my question earlier during the budget. But yeah, 12-13 is the biggest year with 38,500,000 because of the mid-years.
That's right.
So the real question is there a disadvantage to overstating the number versus waiting and doing the mid-year?
So we're really going to have to see how the details of this budget play out, because remember, we're coming in at the end of the year with over a 10% reserve, right, at the end of this year. If we don't have cuts to LCFF base funding and we get some one-time monies, we could be in a better place from a cash perspective, but it's really going to be dependent on how much deferrals play out.
Yeah. I think it also will, I mean, a lot of it will play in and after, I'll say probably early August, once they actually do the accounting for what tax revenue
Taxes.
came in for
Exactly.
this year, since the taxes were deferred. So we will probably see a lot more money than I think we all think we're going to see right now. So, or at least, there'll be more money to go, whether, how big of a piece of pie.
More
that's a
money
different
promised,
discussion.
promised.
Yes, 100%, so. Okay, any other questions? Raymer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.5, approve inter-fund transfer from the general fund to the child development fund. Motion and second, please.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Questions? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, so, but if any questions. Raymer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.6, district membership in the South Bay Purchasing Cooperative. Approval is requested for RBUSD Child Nutrition to opt in to one-year extension, Glasso Bakery contract for the upcoming school year, ending June 30th, 2021. Motion and second, please.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you.
So there will be a number of board items that are coming up that are extensions or contracts for child nutrition with various vendors.
Sounds good. Any questions? All right, so we're gonna move through this rapid fire, so, Raymer, Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
aye, myself, motion carries. 12.7, approval of the same, this one with Driftwood Dairy.
Second.
Raymer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Moving to 12.8, same thing, except this is with P&R Paper Supply Company. Motion and second.
Moved.
Second.
Raymer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Moving to 12.9, same thing, except this is with Gold Star
Second.
Foods. Thank you.
Because
Raymer,
Before you finished, aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad, David,
Aye.
And myself is aye, that's 5. 12.10, Valley Fruit and Produce, same, and Continental Sales Company, same thing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Reimer, Mike, David,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. 12.11, Gold Star Foods, same concept again. Motion and second.
Move.
Second. Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. 12.12, SBPC Staple Foods RFP. Motion second.
Moved.
Second.
Reimer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. 5-0. 12.13, RBUSD and Domino's Pizza for, yeah.
Second. Aye.
Okay, Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Appreciate the lightning round. Now we're moving to 12.14. Approve ESR change order for the Washington Elementary School roofing project.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Alpern.
Yep. There was quite a bit more damage underneath when the workers went to begin the roofing project, which began about 2 weeks ago. And so we really looked at the options and what we could do, and the best option is this change order for $14,750.
Well, kudos to you, Dr. Alpern, for working hard at that, so.
Thank you.
Any questions? Reimer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. 12.15, approval use of Phillips Henderson Esquire, Orbach, Huff, Suarez, and Henderson LLP for services related to cost accounting and other public contract related services.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Alpern.
Yes, you'll see over the next number of action items, request to enter into contracts with various attorneys and law firms that we work with, different staff members work with.
Great. Any questions? Reimer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.16, approval of Stan, I can't pronounce
Stan
his-
B.
Yeah, Stan B, we'll go with that. Regarding to CEQA and other land-related issues. Motion and second.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Reimer,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. 12.17, approve legal services for Rattan and Tucker for legal services. Motion and second.
Move.
Second. Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
David, and I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. 12.18, approve RBUSD COVID-19 community report. We will have Lily.
Wait, do you need me to move in second?
Oh, yes, that would
So
be
moved.
helpful.
Second.
Too much rapid fire.
So in lieu of the LCAP report that was extended to December, school districts were required to submit a written report explaining how our district responded to school closures. And basically, and this is in conjunction with the adopted annual budget that you already approved. Basically, this document explains our program offerings and how we adjusted to meet the needs of our unduplicated students, ELs, foster youth, and low income, and how we provided school meals, how we basically adjusted our instructional delivery model. So staff requests that you approve this action item.
So Sounds good. Any questions?
I guess the only question I have is, was it specified not to put dollars into the report or anything like that? It talks about what we did, but it never says how much it cost.
In terms of the instructional program or meals or?
Can you clarify the question, Brad?
The reason why there's no cost, no dollars.
The dollars put into the report.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer, since it's really a budget question. When we submit the budget to the County Office of Ed, we also need to submit this COVID-19 community report because it's being submitted in lieu of the LCAP. So that's the plan, and then the LCAP originally was suspended or pushed down the road until December. It's looking like it may be suspended for the year. So.
All right.
Good?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Raymer?
Aye.
Mike? Aye. Brad?
Aye.
David? And aye. Motion carries 5-0. 12.19, adopt resolution R1920:40, reduction or elimination of particular classified service. Motion and second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Wesley?
So as you're aware, the South Bay Adult School has two fee-based programs. One's the South Bay Family Tree Preschool Program, and the other is Community Education. And similar to CDC, we haven't collected any type of tuition or income from those two programs since the school closures in March. And we are not going to be able to reopen either of those programs in the fall. So therefore, we're making a recommendation to reduce positions at the South Bay Adult School, and the impacted employees will be notified in person of their bumping rights and their right to be on the 39-month rehire list.
Always hate to see letting people go, but if we can't reopen, we can't reopen. It's not something, unfortunately, we can do at the moment, so. Any questions? Raymer?
Yes, I have one
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry, my
Why
apologies.
can't we reopen in the fall?
So the preschool is, it's actually not a preschool, it's a parent education program, which would require parents to be in the classroom, right? And then the community ed is just a matter of having like yoga classes that people would come to, and we don't foresee being able to do that given our current situation. But we will be on hold for, another spring semester or when we can, so.
Aye.
Mike?
Reluctantly, aye.
Yes. Brad?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
An aye for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.20, initial proposal to the Redondo Beach Teachers Association to the Redondo Beach Unified School District. Motion and second, please.
Second.
Dr. Wesley?
After having publicly presented the Redondo Beach Teachers Association initial proposal at the board meeting the last board meeting, June, staff recommends that you acknowledge the receipt of the 2020-21 Sunshine for negotiations.
Have questions? Raymer?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
Aye for myself. Motion carries 5-0. 12.21, initial proposal RBUSD for RBTA.
Second.
After having received publicly the RBUSD initial proposal to RBTA at the last board meeting, staff recommends that you adopt the RBUSD Sunshine proposal for the 2020-21 negotiations.
Sounds good. Raymer?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
And aye for myself. Motion carries 5-0. 12.22.
Second.
Just going real express today. Go for it.
So this is RBUSD's initial proposal to the California School Employees Association, Chapter 57, for the 2020-21 negotiations. It's a full successor, and staff recommends that you present the RBUSD Sunshine proposal publicly.
Perfect. Raymer?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Aye for myself, motion carries 5-0. 12.23, agreement with School Employers Association of California.
So moved.
Thank you. Dr. Wesley.
This will allow us to continue to provide consulting services for the Health and Welfare Benefits Committee until we determine the best medical insurance providers for our staff before the October 1st renewal date. So we do recommend the approval of this continued service.
Quick question on this, Dr. Wesley. Is this a lump sum, or is this only we pay it as needed?
As needed. So when we use the consultant, we get an invoice, and we only pay it as needed. So if we don't,
This is a not to exceed amount?
correct.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
And aye for myself, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.24, approve renewal of public risk, innovation, solutions, and management and excess insurance authority for our workers' comp in excess of $350,000 for an annual premium of $161,734.
Second.
Dr. Wesley.
This is the annual renewal for our excess liability insurance with Prism, that's what it's now being called, Prism, which is formerly Alliant. And the annual premium is about $12,000 less than last year. And staff recommends that you approve the annual renewal.
Any
Why did we
questions?
get it less?
It's based on our payroll. That's a little bit out of my league, but it is based on
Okay.
our
It's nice that it's less than.
staff payroll.
Okay, Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
Aye for myself, motion carries 5-0. 12.25, declare a declaration of need for fully qualified educators for the 2021 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Wesley.
So we request this declaration from you annually. There are rare instances when we need to hire a certificated staff member on an intern credential, a short-term permit, and/or emergency permit, while a candidate finalizes the credential process in the subject area, where there may be a shortage of fully credentialed employees or candidates, such as the CLAD, B-CLAD, speech and language. Sometimes it's single subject science. Could be an administrative position. Staff recommends that you declare the need for fully funded educators with minimal exceptions should there be a shortage of fully credentialed people applying for the position.
Okay, any questions? Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
And aye, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 12.26, adopt resolution R 1920, reduction or elimination of particular classified services.
So moved.
Need a second? Thank you. Dr. Wesley again.
This is related to one position. It's a recommendation for the elimination of a behavior specialist position, and it's due to the restructuring in the special education department and the way that our needs have transitioned for students with behavior needs. The employee in this position will bump into a position which he or she was she or she previously had seniority.
Okay. Questions? Raymer.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Brad.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
Aye for myself, motion carries 5-0. Last of the ones for today, 12.27, approve pre-apprenticeship agreement with El Camino Community College. So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
This is a request to approve a service agreement with El Camino in order to offer the El Camino courses to South Bay Adult School students. And so courses are for the Pathways program and are related to healthcare, manufacturing, technology, hospitality, and various other working trades. And staff recommends that you approve this service agreement with El Camino.
Any questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
This is the agreement that we've been signing for a number of years. Actually, this one on time. This is one that was late a couple of years ago.
No, that's the high school one, isn't it?
Oh, it's a high school one.
Did you hear the question?
Well, I know we signed an agreement with them this time last year for the same services. when I was in this
Okay,
position.
so it's a repeat of a previous contract, I guess that's what I was confirming.
El Camino has multiple MOUs in place with the school district. Dr. Wesley, having previously, currently, until June 30th, working with the adult school, she presents those contracts from El Camino with the adult school, and then Lily will provide any MOUs, contracts with El Camino that pertains to K-12. I think that's what you're referring to, Brad. So the issue we had previously was a K-12
Right.
contract, and
Right.
they're being proactive, so we want to thank them for that.
So that's good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Raymer?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
And I for myself. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to discussion items. SoCal Rock.
Well, I'll
Mike.
make this very brief because this is very much a work in progress. There have been meetings that have occurred about adjusting the revenue model for SoCal Rock, which is really accelerated by the COVID situation. And we have started discussions with El Camino College. There is a meeting tomorrow between Dr. Allaire and Dr. Maloney. At that meeting, we're going to discuss some very broad opportunities to work closely together. As soon as we have a little more substance to that, then I will definitely bring that to this board and we'll chat about what those opportunities might be, how that would affect us, how that would affect our joint powers authority agreement. Part of this, I think, is a takeoff of the call you were on with Dr. Keller with Al Matsuchi. So there are some movements taking place rather quickly now to shore up the financial side of SoCal Rock so that we can make sure that it's going to be around and sustainable.
Great. Any questions? Sounded like someone was trying to say something. All right. Anyone have correspondence they wish to share? Hearing none. Board member reports. We'll start with Mr. Whitkin.
No report from me.
Okay. Mr. Waller?
Let's see, I'd like to basically congratulate staff and anybody else who organized the RUHS Victory Lap and virtual graduation. I was able to attend the Victory Lap and I watched at least the first half hour or so live of the graduation. And it was very well done. Students looked like they had a lot of fun with it. So I'm happy to see that. I attended the Lincoln CDC reopening. Got to be there for the first few kids arriving. For whatever reason, a lot of them were really late that day. But I got to see the way that the classrooms were arranged, their procedures, health checks, screening, all that. It seemed like even for the second day, it was very well organized. Also got to attend a couple of Zoom sessions with local school board members, Alan Matsuchi and another one, and Alan, where we got to talk to both of them about reopening, budgets, all the things we've been talking about here. And then I guess the last thing I noticed that Juneteenth is being more in the news. School isn't open on Juneteenth anymore, but I was sort of, for a future Friday update, I'd like to know what it is that we have done as a school district with regards to education for something like that, because I know it was not covered when I was in school. I'm just curious, is Juneteenth and things like that part of our curriculum at this point in time? Good question. We'll follow up. Sure.
That's funny, my 13-year-old asked me what it was and said, Mom, why aren't they teaching me that in school?
Fair enough.
The school's out by then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if remarkable enough, there should be at least something about it. So, Mike.
And, again, to reiterate what Brad had mentioned, congratulations to staff for making lemonade out of lemons. And the fact that there were so many elements of that virtual graduation that I liked, I would really suggest we look at carrying those over somehow to the next graduations. I think there was great visibility. I love seeing where the students are going. And so congratulations for taking the best of what you were given and really doing well. I watched the whole thing.
Yeah, and I just want to tell you, the road leading up to that was stressful, but I do want to acknowledge Brad Serkin, who took the lead on that with Mr. Brandt and a whole host of other people, the entire board, but your support is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Raymer?
Agreed, those were all wonderful promotion ceremonies. I actually took a look at some of the middle school and elementary school ones. It was nice that they carried those traditions over, so thank you for that. I was on those Zoom calls that Betty Lou has put together and is probably going to make them a regular basis with Alma Rasucci and Ben Allen, two members from Manhattan to El Segundo, PV, being able to ask them about budget questions. So we'll obviously share anything we have from that. And I say thank you to the previous boards for that higher reserve, because this budget hopefully will not be quite as bad, but we were able to fare very, very differently than our neighbors because of the fiscal solvency that we have. So I'm appreciative of that, and we'll pledge to try and carry on that hefty reserve so we can stay strong as we have been.
Thank you. Yes, graduation. That was, it really was, having watched enough of them with other family and others that have other ones, I have to say the company and the district staff and everything was put together was well done. I had many people watch for my own child graduating, and having watched other ones, they were like, man, we really, we had low expectations, and they were like, it really was fantastic. So it's, selfishly, we have a permanent memento, plus or minus, versus I'll call it from the bleacher view of a video or what have you. But it was very well done, and so, congratulations to staff and everybody for all the hard work and all the work that everyone's been doing. This is, I said tongue-in-cheek earlier, it's like, we never realized we had so much time to do other things, but I know everyone's working extra hard, and it's, it's, the road's still cloudy for the future as far as where it is, so, but, you have our support as far as a board, so. Calendar of events, July 4th, we'll be back here July 21st and August 18th. Any future agenda items?
Just carry those so far, please.
Yes, okay, will do. Hearing nothing else, motion and second for adjournment,
Move.
Second.
and we won't do a roll call vote, we'll just hear an aye.
Aye.
All right, we're done. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah.